Tom, a story Jason just had now. We talked about this off the top of the show today. Call it a bombshell announcement in American media. Tucker Carlson gone from Fox, Don Lemon gone from
Yep.
CNN. What'd you think?
I think it's an incredible, really incredible move on the part of Fox News. But I guess you have to go to what he said, and that was, of course, part of what had to be revealed in the Dominion lawsuit. So you got a lawsuit that was settled for $1 billion Canadian, defamation lawsuit by a company that manufactured the voting machines that have been slandered, essentially, by the people on Fox News telling intentional lies. And they knew that that was going to be proven. But one of the things that they were trying to avoid was, of course, having Rupert Murdoch on the stand, but probably more importantly, Tucker Carlson. Why? Well, because Carlson had essentially written things that proved that Tucker Carlson was a persona. He was a character played by Tucker Carlson. He would say things that he knew not to be true. He put it in writing that he was saying things that he knew were absolute nonsense and with which he completely disagreed. But he knew he was playing a game for and on behalf of Fox News. So I guess that even for Rupert Murdoch, $1 billion slap on the wrist is enough to say, okay, get rid of the guy who just cost me $1 billion. His name happens to be Tucker Carlson, and he's gone.
Will this signal a shift going forward in how news is broached, particularly on Fox?
Well, I think that the completely fake news of Fox News, which is kind of interesting because the guy who, of course, invented the term fake news benefited so much from that sort of story from Fox. That was, of course, Donald Trump. I think that we're into a completely different territory here. I think that now these companies are going to have to start thinking about what they say, what they put online, a lot more than they had to do in the past, Natasha. And the Americans are funny that way. I mean, their tort system, their court system has been the great leveler over the years. Tobacco companies couldn't have given a hoot. They put up fake information. They said that smoking was good for your T section, and doctors agreed that smoking was good for you. It was all nonsense. It was only when they had to pay hundreds of billions with a B in damages that they stopped doing that sort of thing. The next in line is going to be the big oil companies, the big petroleum producers who have known about what they've been doing to the planet for years, global warming, climate change, completely putting up a fake news system, completely trying to con people into believing that the science wasn't unanimous on this and maybe it wasn't really happening. They're going to get banged out for hundreds of billions as well. So the tort system in the States has this way of leveling the playing field. You have this smallish company against this behemoth, which is Fox News, coming out the winner. And I think, yes, the idea that you can eventually be called upon to pay for that sort of outrageous lie, I think that's going to start to sink in.
You know, I wonder, I was kind of half joking. So Don Lemon goes for the comment he made about Nikki Haley. Now we know that Tucker Carlson, and I heard you talking earlier today, and I love the way you phrased it then. That Tucker Carlson is like an actor who's playing a character named Tucker Carlson. We don't know what the real Tucker Carlson is, although it was pointed out to us, he used to work at CNN back in the day, right?
Yeah. So I mean, you can just imagine when he's sitting down having a beer with his friends, he's not that character.
Right.
And it is so, it's like nails on the blackboard to listen to this guy speak. And because part of my job is to listen to all of them, I had to include Tucker Carlson in the mix. But it really was grating to have to listen to him. And you can't say that it was stupid. It's not necessarily the case that anything he said was completely dumb, but the whole package made absolutely no sense. But it had one purpose in mind, which was to keep people angry. And he was quite good at that. Now, maybe he's going to have to apply some of that because I'm sure he's quite angry right now and having been turfed. Although when you go back to what happened and what was revealed, all the stuff that he was the number one, shoot bootlicker of Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And he was writing horrible things about Trump, calling him basically an idiot and disagreeing with everything he said.
To Natasha's point, though, do you think this maybe is the first step in Fox beginning to change their attitude, or just one isolated case and that's all, we don't make anything more of it?
The only place they can go is even harder right. And that means that they're going to try to take away the competitors that are popping up on the right. But that puts them into the Alex Jones category, people who just, InfoWars, people who make stuff up completely, and even they get banged out because Jones, of course, has been banged out for massive lawsuits by saying that the school killing in the United States was a complete fabrication. So we are into a post-truth era, And, there was something over the weekend. This is a tiny detail. Trudeau had an interesting moment where he was talking with a student in Manitoba. And the student came at him with some pretty hard right stuff, against a woman's right to choose and so forth. Trudeau had a good moment. He had a good discussion with the guy. Lo and behold, online, within a couple of hours, people were saying, the whole thing was staged by the Liberals. The student doesn't really exist. Is that Justin Trudeau's son talking to him? And this is stuff that people are writing online.
Wow.
So not only is it the case that people make stuff up like Fox News, but even when something actually happens that gets proper coverage, people can throw doubt onto the whole thing as to whether or not it even took place. That's the tough part of doing news and analysis in this day and age.
And then what about Don Lemon? Because, he said things that were terrible, and I totally and completely, he should not have said them, and there should be consequences. But is it a bit much given his history?
No, they couldn't deal with him anymore at CNN. So I'll give you a concrete example. Karine Jean-Pierre, the extraordinary, the press secretary at the White House, she had to give an interview on CNN. She agreed to an interview, and she simply made it a condition. They're all saying that it was CNN's decision. Of course, it's an editorial decision. Nobody imposes that. She had said she would not go on if she was going to be interviewed by Don Lemon. So he had become such an impediment for them being able to do their jobs that they knew that he had to go. And women were, it's interesting, sometimes these things do a slow burn. You'll have the types of incidents that happen and everybody gets upset, but 6 days later everybody's forgot about it. This one stayed.
Mm-hmm,
and the image of this guy giving categories of women who were past their prime, but if you were in your 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, so like Joe Biden's okay, right? The guy's 80, but he's fine.
Bizarre.
He's not past his prime. So it was pure misogyny. Yeah. It was sexism. He got called on it, and it wasn't going away. And CNN had to take a decision. The timing, I think, was a pure accident. I don't think that CNN and Fox News talk about firing their key people, but it was literally within a couple of minutes of each other that they had a parting of the ways.
So look for Don Lemon on Fox any day now.
Oh, right. That's
that's going to happen. Tom, let's talk about closer to home. This Quebec tunnel situation. It's funny. We talked to Jim Meny before, saying, can you remember the last time something like this has stayed in the news for as long as it has? Eric Duhem kicked it a little further down the field today, trying to convince CAQ MNAs who were upset or really bothered by this to go ahead and join as Conservatives. I guess that's a bit of a Hail Mary. But this is turning into a bigger deal, perhaps, than the government thought it would?
It's exactly what we just described. Usually a government can just make something up, say that they're going to do something when they decide not to do it because it was not true. Again, within our actual time that we had in politics, we used to say 6 weeks. Almost anything could be forgiven and forgotten in 6 weeks. But the scope and the scale of this bold-faced lie by François Legault. He knew that he had no studies. This thing made no sense. The numbers were pulled out of thin air. It was going to be 2 tunnels, and then it was going to be 3 tubes, and then it was going to be this and that. All pure BS, just completely made up prior to the last election. And he got caught. So he was going to have to back off. Now he's saying that maybe he's going to put a tramway in there, which basically means it'll only run a few hours a day and it'll be totally useless. And so he's getting caught, but every single MNA, especially people from the Beauce region, very proud people, very, an interesting region, just got hit with a big plant closing of 1,000 people losing their job. But these are all people in those areas just south of Quebec City, Lévis. Go to those areas. People are proud. They're hardworking. They believed they were going to get what everybody knew that they needed, which was another bridge. Then it turned into these tubes and these tunnels. And it was completely made up. So now these MNAs, they're talking about it on background. They can't go to a restaurant. They can't go out. They can't go out for a beer with their friends. They're just going to get screamed at by everybody. And I think that Eric Duhem has a better than even chance of being able to convince one of them, look, you got elected to represent the people in your area on a specific promise with regard to this third link. Why don't you come and work with me? We'll do stuff together. You'll be much better known. And that message is probably going to go through with somebody. I am being told right now that Legault has had to do something he almost never has to do, which is caucus management. He's going to have a meeting with his Quebec area MNAs because he's got to try to lower the temperature. He's in trouble. This one will paint his government for the next 3.5 years until the next election. It paints them as unreliable. That's stuff you can get over. It paints them as cynical liars. That's something that's very hard to get over.